Hi, I'm Professor Green, and today we'll be talking about the Introduction to Public Speaking, Chapter 1 from the publicspeakingproject.org. There'll be 4 parts to our chapter today. First, we'll talk about the introduction. Then we'll talk about the description of the benefits of public speaking. Then we'll talk about the communication models that are out there. And then fourth, we'll talk about the types of speeches. First, introduction. For many of you, this is a required course, right? You may not necessarily want to be here, but as the state of California recognizes, public speaking is a very important skill. But many do not want to like or give speeches, right? So all colleges within California require this course because they feel that it is so valuable. But the nice thing is that anyone can learn to give effective presentation. This course will show you exactly how to break down your speech, how to organize it, how to prepare, so that even if you're reluctant to give speeches, you can walk into the room or into the Zoom classroom and be completely confident. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the description of the benefits of public speaking. It's the description of the personal, professional, and public benefits. First, the personal. So many of you have been to weddings, perhaps you've been to a funeral, and maybe you've done some volunteer work. So those are great opportunities to give a speech, a eulogy. Maybe you're organizing some friends to do some gardening or work at a soup kitchen. Public speaking will come in handy very often. Then professional. So for all of us, we're starting our college experience, right? Many of you will go on to 4-year schools and enter into the workforce, maybe go into graduate school. Research has shown that 70% of jobs require some sort of public speaking, as quoted here by Arras in 2012. Many of you are aware of this shift from manufacturing to service careers here in the United States. So this requires more informative and persuasive speaking. So no longer are we producing cars or we working in factories, right? Those are now more for third world and developing countries. The United States is a first world nation. And so we've moved more into service careers. So we're managers. We're not actually putting the pieces of the automobile or the equipment together. We're actually overseeing people who do that work for us. The last are public benefits here. So public benefits include helping us to listen more carefully and being able to critique other speeches. This is so valuable here because now the media and the role of journalism has shifted, right, in the past 5 or 10 years. No longer can we completely trust the media, right, that they have moved their role so that it's more and more biased, right? That's just a fact. And so as listeners, we have to critique that. Say, ask, where are the sources? Where is the credibility of this writer or of this speaker? And so taking this class not only allows you to deliver a speech, but to much more effectively listen and critique a speech. Now we're going to talk about our third section of the chapter, the communication models, and they focus on 2 major communication models. The first one is a traditional one called the linear model. This was invented in 1949 by Bell Labs. It's a one-way communication, and honestly, it's no longer very realistic. It was developed for radio and TV transmission. As you can see here, there's a sender, someone who's speaking, there's a channel, whether it be television, radio, newspaper, etc., and then there's a receiver. And then the receiver just hears the information. But today, in today's day and age, we work with what's called a transactional model. This model was invented by Barnould in 2008, and he talks about this being an ongoing circular process. So this diagram here is from your textbook, and it's super interesting as you take it apart, right? So you'll see that here on the left-hand side, there's a communicator, so someone who's speaking. In the textbook, they also talk about the person who's speaking is not only sending a message, but they're receiving messages, right, from the audience. So as you give a speech, you're looking around the room, you're watching to see if people are looking at you, if they're smiling, if they're interested, maybe they're on their phones, maybe they're taking notes. So you're not only sending out a message, but you're receiving messages as a communicator. And then this model also talks about the message, so what you're actually delivering. and the message that you're receiving back from the audience. And then again, just like in our linear model of communication, we always have a channel. So maybe that's Zoom, maybe that's radio, television, newspaper, etc. And then we have noise here I want to talk about because that is so important. That noise is all these other distractions, all these other things that are happening in the room that are catching our attention. Maybe that's actual noise, or maybe there's construction across the street, but more than likely there are things going on. The clothing that people are wearing, the side conversations that people are having, how the technology, the microphone is working in the room. So all these other things that can distract us from hearing and understanding the message. There's also the context. So why are you all here? So for us for today, you're all required to be here. So I know that maybe you want to be here, maybe you don't. But we are in an academic environment. So my message here is going to be a little bit more serious, right? I'm not going to be making lots of jokes. I'm not going to be playing a lot of cartoons, right? That we're in an academic environment and we are here to learn. So it's a little bit more serious. And the last thing I want to talk about here is the worldview. And there are so many interesting parts to our worldview, which we'll get into more deeper throughout the course and throughout the semester. But I did want to hit upon all those real quickly. So epistemology, right? The way we acquire knowledge, the way we Google, the way we do research, the way we bring information into our brain, right? No longer do we go to a library very often, right? Because all that information is mostly online, and especially in situations with the pandemic, right? We can't even go to a library. We have to do that all online. Ontology, our belief system. So again, so this is the receiver of the message, and so all these things that are going on in the receiver's head that affect how they receive the message, right? And so moving on to ontology, that's their belief system. So we shouldn't assume as a speaker that all the audience members share the same belief, right? And so we want to be aware of that, because as a receiver, you have an original belief system that's going to affect how you understand and are perhaps persuaded by the message. Then we have axiology, similar, our value system, cosmology, the way we see our relationship to the universe and to other people, right? So all these things that we learn as children, as we begin to get adults, to get more of a stronger foundation. And the last one, praxeology, our preferred method of completing everyday tasks, right? And how we organize and like to hear information. So all these things go into how we're understanding a speech. An example of that is all these different things is, if I were to start talking about my dog, then all of a sudden in your mind you have an image of a dog. But right, is that a greyhound dog? Is that a corgi? Is that a Maltese? Is that a big dog, a small dog, a white dog, a black dog? So that's an example of when I speak, every audience member has a different way of receiving the message. Great, so really nice introduction here to the communication models that are out there. We're going to continue now. Great, that was the transactional model. And so just expanding further on that transactional model, right? They also talk about encoding and decoding processes, right? And so encoding is a process of taking a mental image, associating the image with words, and speaking those words. And then the decoding is turning those words into images. So that's what I was just speaking about, right? The word dog. When I say the word dog, all of a sudden now you have an image in your head. The communicator, as I mentioned, right, not just the sender, because we observe nonverbal behavior known as feedback. The message, verbal and nonverbal behaviors that are interpreted with meaning. And the channel, as I spoke about. Good. So I wanted to go through this, not in this slide, but in the previous slide, because it made more sense with that diagram. Good. And so again here, just to reiterate, noise, anything that interferes with the message transmission, the reception, our psychological, physiological, physical, or cultural. information, right? Things that are going on in the room and in our mind. Here's our worldview that I just went through. And our context, as I mentioned, right? Our physical place, plus the type of relationship we have with others and communicative rules that govern the relationship. So as I said, our context here is an academic environment. Great, so now we're going to go into the types of speeches. The first one is a type of speech to inform. So those are facts. Those are information that we research, and we're not trying to persuade anybody, we're just informing them. So we're not going to talk about here saving the earth, recycling, global warming, right? We're going to talk about things like inform you about corgi dogs. We're going to talk to you about the weather in South America. That's a fact, right? So we're just informing you about information. Another type of speech is to persuade, right? So, and now this is where we're talking about global warming, we're talking about abortion, we're talking about the death penalty. So you might want to hear persuade someone of your opinion of something. And the last one is to commemorate or entertain. So this is where when you go to a wedding or go to a eulogy, this is where that type of speech would be relevant and helpful. Good. Now we're going to go through the 11 competencies of primary public speaking. And these are super interesting. You'll use these again and again and again throughout the semester. First, you're going to find a useful topic, right? Something that is interesting to you and hopefully interesting to the audience. Then you're going to include an engaging introduction. So we're going to talk about this further again, starting out with a quote or a statistic. You want to grab their attention very, very quickly. You want to have clear organization, and I'll show you in this course exactly how to organize your speeches. We'll typically have 3 main points and 2 subpoints for each main point. And we want to make sure that we have clear transitions, well-supported ideas, as I already touched upon, right? What's your credibility when you inform people about types of the corgi dog? You want to make sure that you've done your research and you know something about this. And you want to have your closure and your conclusion. You want to set the expectations to the listener that your speech is ending and that it's over. You also want to have clear and vivid language, right? So we want to make sure that we're communicating exactly what it is that we want to say. And we don't want to use slang, and we don't want to use words that people might not know, especially if you're, speaking about something in Latin America and maybe you want to use some words in Spanish. You want to make sure that you translate those words for the audience if they're not all Spanish speakers. So continuing on with our 11 competencies, we want to have a suitable vocal expression, right? And so that means not saying too many times. That means using our tone and not being monotone. As you noticed already, I change my pitch throughout my delivery. I go a little bit higher, I get a little bit lower. I use a higher volume to grab your attention, right? So often in these courses, people are so monotone, and after 5 or 7 minutes, it gets really boring. So you're going to want to make sure that you change your vocal expression throughout your speech. You're going to have corresponding nonverbals. So if you notice already, I use my fingers, I use my shoulders, I use my arms, I use my hands to communicate things. I want to adapt it to the audience, right? So now I'm talking to a class. If I was speaking to a group of professionals, maybe that would be a different delivery style, different vocabulary. Adept use of visual aids. As you can see here, I have some nice slides. I highly, highly encourage you to use visual aids. Slides are super easy to make. I'll have you go through an exercise of creating slides in this class because I find it so, so valuable. If you're going to do a persuasive speech, you're going to have convincing persuasion, and I'll show you in this course how to do that. And that completes our chapter 1, our introduction to public speaking. Let me know if there are any questions. And again, I'm Professor Green, and this is Public Speaking from the publicspeakingproject.org.